to give people the attention that they deserve when they're presenting.
Right.
Anyway, let's go ahead and go through this. I think we've actually gone through a version of this, but the reason that this is timely again is we're going to be confronted with the commercial development that's up on 750 North. And so I wanted to kind of get back up to speed on this. We're still hoping to have our subcommittee review design review issues as well, but I want you guys to be familiar with some of these issues and realize or recognize that you know, there can be a lot of details that probably you haven't dealt with before and that we may need to confront relatively soon. And I want you to be able to ask questions when we start to get into that and possibly give directions to our citizens committee once that meeting's scheduled. This is Provo, just to give you an idea of some of the design. You know, obviously they have a lot of historic buildings to use as a basis. One of our challenges is that we don't have a lot of commercial historic buildings. So we're going to have to, what?
We're gonna have to build them.
We're going to have to build them. We're going to be tasked with looking at some of the historic buildings that have existed in the past. I think we've got pictures out in the hallway. There's also a couple of the historic books that are available that we should spend time looking over. With regard to the forms, the window patterns and things like that, all of these things are important. In the last city council meeting, we kind of had a little discussion with one of our applicants regarding the housing architecture that they were addressing. And they were kind of concerned that we were, you know, being a little bit picky with architecture, but I think it's going to be even more important with the commercial district, and so that's why I think it's important that we give ourselves a little refresher course. If we had historic buildings, there are significant standards that are available to us that both the state has and adheres to when they're doing preservation projects, when they're funding them. The school districts and the state history department, when they're participating, use these guidelines. But overall, design guidelines, it's important that they're flexible. You know, that we don't want to completely be so rigid that people can't come in and have creative architecture, try new things, but we need to give them some direction. The other important part is that there's public participation, and that would be both through our subcommittee and when we have a public hearing at the point where we've revised our design review guidelines would be typically the time that the public would be most involved or able to be most involved. And again, I think some of the things that I'd like you to be thinking about are what are the most characteristic design elements you can see today in Willard, the things that we can easily point to future developers as well as our current developers and say, you know, these are the elements that are important to us. The ones that come to mind for me are the stone residences. Those are features that can also be extended to the commercial district as well. The other items that we need to consider is in the two areas that we've kind of focused on, the downtown core and 750 North, what heights do we want? You know, right now we could do as high as 75 feet out in the, particularly out in that area, in the north area. I'd argue that 75 feet probably isn't appropriate downtown, and we probably need to look at revising what we're doing, what's capable of being done in the downtown for that reason. It would overshadow all the existing buildings plus the housing that's near it. And if we determine that that's not a concern, that's viable too, but we need to make sure that that's what we want. And then just come up with minimal standards of compatibility. And that could be as simple as saying that we need to be compatible with the majority of the structures on the street. You know, there's really simple ways of achieving that, but you can go beyond it as well and say more specific things about the buildings and the style, again. Parking, setbacks, all those typical standards that we address in our zoning ordinance. These are some things that design guidelines can do. They can address physical changes that are being made to buildings. Typically, smaller towns don't get real robust in their enforcement of codes against existing buildings. We got a pretty creative solution, I think, on our recent Blake Heating and Cooling. I think they've done a pretty good job. I don't know what the rest of you feel about that. But, you know, that was an existing building that obviously was in a great deal of disrepair. And so typically you want to work carefully with people because you don't want to scare people away from trying to do improvements if it's going to cost them so much because we're being so rigid. So it's a fine balance. Now, that one was hard to protect the existing architectural character. So that was, again, a little bit of a challenge. But there were standards that, you can look up and down Highway 89 into the surrounding cities and identify similar buildings to that and say, this is what typically has been done here, both on lighting, and that's what I used as an example with most of that project was, here's what type of lighting are on these little garage type structures that were, either used as, repair places or gas stations at one time. And so that was the basis for that review primarily. He even talked a lot about, the type of roll-down doors. And if you look up and down the highway, there are actually windows in a lot of the roll-down doors, and I wasn't real rigid with them, even though there were windows in the original building. They're somewhat more expensive, and so I use a little bit of latitude and let him just put in new doors and not worry about it, because he changed the size of the doors so that they both matched. And so the compromise was to let him do it without the windows. The hard part gets to be architectural quality. None of us, I think, are architects, and so it can be challenging. There is a fine line, though. We've talked a lot about this with the city council, and they feel fairly strong. I think Mitch maybe could say a few words about it, but that especially in our newer, not this historic district, but the area on 750 North, the buildings that are out there now are somewhat industrial, and yet we've kind of talked about trying to have a higher standard of architecture in the new buildings that might be located out there. So there's going to be some kind of a balancing effect. How do we deal with some and then have this kind of double standard? So we've got to be really careful how we come up with that solution. But we have to recognize also that Willard has few areas that are really going to be strong commercially. That 750 North corridor is probably the biggest, there's the most gravity for it to be successful on a commercial basis. In the historical area down here, it's going to be a little bit more challenging because we don't have a particular standard. The lots are smaller and they're more difficult to deal with, and just the pressure and the value probably isn't here yet. And that's not to say that we wouldn't be even more rigid in our design standards here, but just that it'll take a longer time to actually have most of those things start to change. Typically, design standards can't be used to regulate growth, control exterior changes, or non-exterior changes, meaning the inside of the buildings. They can't really guarantee good design, although there are some things, but as you get in that direction, you have to be more rigid, and you have to either use an architectural review committee of some sort, meaning we might want to bring in an architectural expert from time to time, or definitely bring in an architectural specialist in writing our code, so that it's something that we could enforce and implement easily, and come up with standards consistent with what we would identify as the standards that are important to Willard. Whatever those either basic ones are, or if we get more complex, make sure that they're consistent and not going to hamper development too much. So these are all things you can see. One of our, probably the closest to our situation is the small home in the middle there. There's pictures of Salt Lake City here, the plat for Zion, you can see that. Another plat here on the right-hand side, just a typical Utah plat, and some of the spacing issues that typically exist. It's fairly consistent that residential lots have these type of narrow characteristics, where the frontages are, especially the older lots in the core area downtown, are narrower and longer. So you have those types of struggles. And sometimes you have interior lots that aren't well developed because it's converted over time. Sometimes those were farms and things like that. And so you're trying to make something that doesn't exist anymore work in a different context, and so that can be challenging. But the basics are still available for us to address, which are access, the way they impact the road, the way they relate to each other, meaning the front setback typically. In commercial districts, obviously it goes back to the features that are there.